welcome to Lesson 6 of Module 4 for Investigating Science. We're going to start with our do now. So we're going to recall from Lesson 5 the law of conservation of energy. And if you can, listing some examples of where you might see this law happening in everyday life. So for this lesson, we're going to be looking at the inquiry question, how are theories and laws used in science? And we're going to be building on what we learned last lesson and observed in our practical activity about the law of conservation of energy. And we're going to use that as our starting point to see how we can apply that law in different science disciplines. So looking at how we apply it to chemistry, physics, human biology, and earth and environmental science. And again, our learning intention to perform an investigation to collect evidence that supports an idea. So in this video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of where we'll see this, the law of conservation of energy in these different science fields, and then we're going to apply them at the end. So the first one is chemistry, and it's where we see what's happening in endothermic and exothermic reactions, and whether a chemical reaction releases or absorbs energy, the overall amount of energy does not change in that reaction. So that's where the law of conservation of energy is applied in chemical reactions. And that energy that is within that system allows the reactions to rearrange the elements from the breakdown of chemical bonds. So we're seeing new substances and products in our reactants and products reaction. In physics, we look at the law of conservation of energy being applied to how objects move and the motion that we'll see there. So an object at rest has the potential energy, and then once a force is applied, that potential energy is transformed into kinetic energy, which then will dissipate as heat, and then we'll see that object regain its potential energy again. In human biology, we see the law of conservation of energy in cycles and in our systems that organisms use to survive. And we use that energy to perform metabolic functions. We can see here the heat that producers obtain allows them to photosynthesize, which then allows herbivores in our food chain to consume that chemical energy, then allowing carnivores again to absorb that energy, and then we see that decomposition resulting back into that carbon cycle that we see. So we can see this law of conservation of energy really clearly in human biology and our living systems. And then in earth and environmental science, we're looking at the different spheres and the planet itself, seeing that energy transformations actually happen all the time and at larger scales than what we've looked at before. That allows the Earth as a system in itself to continue to perform all of the reactions that it needs to provide energy to the living things, but also allow this energy to flow in a cycle, which we can see on the left here in our diagram. So the activities we're going to look at today is we are going to look at some of the different, and we may not get to all of them in the classroom, but the first is we're going to look at exothermic and endothermic reactions and see that happening in a chemical way. We're going to be looking at the pendulum experiment to see how we would use the law of conservation of energy in physics. We're then going to look at fermentation reactions, looking at how biological systems use the law of conservation of energy, and then we're going to analyze some secondary source data to look at how the law of conservation of energy is applied in the Earth, and we're going to be looking specifically, we can see here a preview of the graph that we're looking at. We're looking at carbon dioxide levels and temperature and seeing how they work within the law of conservation of energy. And again, completing our Google form to consolidate our knowledge and practice some exam style questions, and then updating our inquiry question log. So how are theories and laws used in science?